Hello, and welcome to this episode of Breaking Down the Networking Chains. We are going to talk in this episode about remote management within Azure. I'm Dwayne Natwick. I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP and a Senior Cloud Training Architect at Opsagility and Skill Me Up. I have multiple Azure certifications. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and a regional lead for that program. And you can find me on the social media links that are provided on the slide. We're getting towards the end of this series, and I have been trying to think of where we're going to take this after we've run down through these topics. And what my plan is we're into October now, and around Halloween, I'm going to start a new series of sessions and videos focusing on security in Azure. And then after that, I'm going to go into another series on security in Microsoft 365. I think we have a lot of topics around that we can cover, and those are going to be my next two series as we wind down this series on network services within Azure. And we're going to talk this week about remote management connections, and we're going to focus a lot on Bastion hosts and just-in-time VM access to be able to support and work within a virtual machine in the Azure environment. So really what we're talking about in terms of our security posture here is having a secure means for monitoring and managing our services within the Azure environment. So that's where we are within our posture here. It has a lot to do with identity and access, as well as our perimeter security and how we're maintaining that secure environment so that others can't get into our environment, and decrease that attack surface and that ability for attackers to compromise our user credentials and get into our virtual machines. So something that we did not talk about when we were talking about hybrid connectivity was we didn't talk about service endpoints a whole lot. But service endpoints can be utilized for connectivity to the PaaS services and directly from a virtual network. So we can put those in place to connect directly to blob storage or directly to a PaaS database, a SQL database, from our local on-premise network right into right through the Microsoft backbone, which is going to provide that a forced tunnel of traffic and provide priority to that connection over our internet service provider without it and taking priority over such as a site-to-site VPN, and it's a more private connection than a IPsec tunnel. And you can see here, it's providing that route and it's providing that direct connection in that case, and allows then that download to take place. Again, another point is the private endpoints as well. It's very similar to that, and it's going to provide a private DNS zone to your endpoint. So again, it provides that connected network, that hybrid connectivity, and provides a private connection to your environment. And now Azure Bastion. Many organizations have learned through probably trial and error and issues that being able, having an RDP port directly to your virtual machines is dangerous. And many organizations have put in place as a best practice is a jump box, as it's called, to be able to, that ultimately a management point where the managed service provider or the remote support team can connect to, can RDP into that jump box, and that jump box is in a DMZ or demilitarized zone, a separate network, an isolated network, and then they connect into the Azure production network to do their maintenance and support. So there's a extra gate and layer of defense in how they connect to that network. Microsoft has put in the Bastion host capability within the Azure environment to put some more security around how that management jump is taking place. The Bastion hosts run on a separate subnet called the Bastion subnet, and they are a fully managed service, and it's more protected than simply putting a jump box, which is a virtual machine. It's going to be generally a Microsoft or Linux OS that may have patch vulnerabilities or the ability for some sort of service backdoor. The Bastion host is one that it provides that jump to your virtual machines through RDP or SSH without the need to access the operating system. So therefore, decreasing again your attack surface. And we'll show how easy and quickly it is to set up an Azure Bastion here in the demo portion of this video. So what goes in conjunction to that is setting up just-in-time VM access as well. And this is a secondary piece to our remote management of our virtual machines, where we have our Bastion host, and some users and enterprises may still want to use a jump box. You could do that, and then getting to your virtual machines, setting up that just-in-time virtual machine access sets up just a maintenance window on that virtual machine where the network security group port for 3389 for RDP or 22 for SSH is only open for a specific amount of time. It is not left always open. So when you enable just-in-time virtual machine access on your virtual machines, and then you request access, the amount of time that access is requested for and approved is now creates a NSG rule, which is a network security group rule. If you remember from a video previously, seems like months ago now, will provide then, it will create that rule within the network security group for that period of time where that port is now open, but it will close within 3 hours if you're setting that up, or within an hour. So you can go in, do your maintenance that you need to do. That port's then going to close. So if somebody does find their way into your environment, they cannot use the exposure of that port and get into your virtual machine and get into the operating systems of your network where they could really start doing some damage. And finally, before we get into the demo, this is a reference architecture showing where your Bastion subnet falls within the environment. And you can see it is isolated in its own network security group, its own subnet, its own IP schema, and then you have the ability then to jump into that, and then through the network peering and the firewall, get into your virtual machines and do your maintenance work. So again, just pointing out how isolated this is. Again, if you're using a jump box, it would fall in the same place, but the great thing about the Bastion host is even when you get into it, you don't have access to an operating system. So it's a fully managed service, and you don't have to worry about an exposure that is created by an operating system issue. So let's jump into a demo on how to configure just-in-time virtual machine access, as well as just quickly how easy it is to set up a Bastion host. So I'm in my Azure portal, and we're going to set up a Azure Bastion here first. And you can see I've got it right here on my services, or you can very easily just type Bastions, find Bastions, and we're going to add a Bastion. I'll put it in my resource group that I already have, and we can create our naming. We'll put it in East US because I think I have a virtual network there. We can put it in an existing virtual network, or we can create our own virtual network. I'll create a new virtual network for this. Give it an address range. I'll just keep the defaults. And you can see I did not meet the criteria here. I need to have a prefix of at least /27. So let's fix that now. So a key thing here is that when you create your virtual network for your Bastion host, you need to name that subnet Azure Bastion subnet, and it has to be a /27 subnet. So as you could see, when I did the creation, I got the error that I did not meet that criteria, so it would not let me out of there until I fixed that problem. And we'll just leave our public IP address as the default, and we are going to review and create. And just that easy, we've created now our Bastion host. So the next thing I wanted to show was I wanted to show our just-in-time virtual machine access configuration. So let's go to our security center. We can do this in one of two ways. If we have one thing that we need to have is we need to have a standard Azure Security Center subscription. And once we have that Azure Security Center subscription, we have just-in-time virtual machine access. And you can see I have 2 virtual machines that are currently configured for virtual machine just-in-time access. I have 3 that are not configured for it. So I could very easily select all 3 of these. I could select just 2 if I want. If I don't need to get into any of these and don't need to RDP or SSH into them, I think they're all Windows machines. So you can leave them out of the loop if that is the case. If you're just using automation to patch and you don't believe you're ever going to need to go into those, you can certainly do that. But so there's 2 ways that we can do it. So we can select this lab here and enable just-in-time virtual machine access. We can determine which port. We can do a time range. So if I want to configure this a little bit differently, I can select my 3389, and you can see I can give it up to 24 hours or as little as 1 hour of access. So we can leave it at the default of 3. We can discard and remove. If we don't need SSH access, we can delete that one out of there and avoid the need for that port to be open. And then we can just save, and that's going to just deploy the configuration to that virtual machine. Another way that we can enable just-in-time virtual machine access is going directly to the VM. So if I go to my virtual machines, and I believe this availability set was not configured. So when we go into virtual machines and we go into, say, demo VM1 here, we can see that we're getting some recommendations here. Another way that we can find these connects is if we go to connect to that virtual machine, we can see that there is a just-in-time access policy on this VM. So we need to request that access. So that's how just-in-time virtual machine connectivity works. So we have that access policy in place. If I go to, say, another of my virtual machines and I'm in Connect that does not have just-in-time in place, it will actually show you the warning to improve the security by enabling just-in-time access. So right from this virtual machine, you get that warning, and you can enable just-in-time from right here, and set your configuration up for that virtual machine, just like you can in Security Center. Nice thing about Security Center is you can go through and do it for all your virtual machines. You could also set up a policy in place to put just-in-time virtual machine access right in place as well. If we go into our policy definitions, and let me search, and there is a policy initiative to protect with just-in-time network access controls. We can assign this to our virtual machines, and then we can enable it for all of our virtual machines to utilize just-in-time virtual machine access if we want that to be a overall all-encompassing policy within our environment, which is beneficial and recommended as a best practice. And that brings us to the end of this video. So hope you enjoyed the demo and the information provided around remote management of our virtual machines and our connections to those virtual machines to do remote management and maintenance. Please feel free to follow me on the social media links provided on the slide, and I'll see you for the next video.